The book I would like to present today is in reality a collection of different books because they were published before by New in Chess under different format. This is a Botvinnik versus Smyslov, which happened in 1954, 1957, 1958, and then there is the book with Petrosian, the World Championship on Petrosian in 1963. So this is the collection of all their games played in that World Championship. Now, inside the book you will find a beautiful thing that they did. For example, you see the match Botvinnik-Smyslov 1954. You have all the games, the number of moves, the type of opening, the results. You see everything here, okay? The games themselves have been translated by different people, but mainly one translator that at a certain point, thanks I think to, I don't know, Fritz 4, Fritz 5, started to find some problems with the analysis. So they have been corrected through the computer, and that's really great, okay? Of course, there is also the history of this game, there is the preparation that Botvinnik had, so there are also his notebooks. I honestly love the tables because they are clear, okay, and they show you truth. And then of course there are also for each match the regulations. But now why in this computer age you need to watch the games of FIDE World Championship matches of such a long time ago, right? Why? Something that happened more than 50 years ago. Well, the explanation is here. In this book, Applying Logic in Chess, I.M. Kislik says that in order to become a good chess player, you need to practically watch all the World Championship games from 1940 onward. That will clearly show you all you need to know in chess, okay, for making you a kind of strong player, because it will give you idea of the evolution of chess through their theory. It will give you a lot of things. So I will try to show you many of these games because it's also beneficial to me, honestly. And I believe it's interesting also to give you a kind of view of how the theory changed, because from one match to the other obviously they were fighting on some points of theory, opening theory in things like the Caro-Kann, the French defense, or obviously on the Queen's opening, like with d4. So I believe this is the book you should have. There is also another reason, honestly. You have practically like 2 or 3 books in one, but the price is just like $29.95, so it's worth it. It's worth it, because you don't get a book that is nearly 500 pages for this kind of price, right? So it's clearly a great book to have in your library at home, a book to watch the games, also if you don't understand everything, just to be exposed to them. And so now I will put back the pieces in the right places, and we start to show you a game, okay? I will begin showing game number 1, Vasily Smyslov against Mikhail Botvinnik Black, played in Moscow in 17 of March in 1954. Now, one thing that I would like to explain that maybe many people don't understand, a match like this went on for something like 66 days, which means more than 2 months that they were fighting. clearly it was kind of strenuous on the participant. But here is the funny part. They were playing these matches for like less than $1,000 or a couple of $1,000. So imagine that, okay? So the book begins with a note: in all, I played 3 World Championship matches with Smyslov, in which we met a total of 69 times. This was Smyslov's best period, and overall he emerged with the smallest of advantages: 18 wins, 17 losses and 34 draws. However, when it came to the World Championship laurels, I was ahead 2-1, which means the writer is Botvinnik. I was ahead 2-1 because in the event of a drawn match, the world champion retained his title. Okay, so we find also a lot of ideas on how chess was played in the time in relation to the regulations of a world championship match. So Smyslov is white, he plays e4, and Botvinnik plays e6, d4, d5, knight c3. Smyslov almost always chooses this move. It seems to me that in the event of free knight d2, it is more difficult for black to obtain counterplay. So Botvinnik thought that this move was more difficult to face compared to knight c3. The fact that it tells you that Smyslov always played this move, it means that he collected all of Smyslov's games, he went through all of them and saw what he usually played and prepared for that. But in the time he didn't have a computer to find the best move, okay? So he had to analyze them by himself. He continued with a free bishop b4. This sharp continuation has been popular for several decades. Black often ends up in a relatively difficult position, but he obtains active counter chances. Now you must understand, all these games for sure were studied by Fischer, because Fischer thought he could have a chance at play against Botvinnik. e5. White has many other far from unfavorable possibilities, which are a3, bishop d2 and knight e2, okay? But unfortunately one can play only one of these in a single game. In the present match, Smyslov chose only the move for e5 in games 1, 3 and 9, and for a3 in games 7, 19 and 21. So I think it could be interesting to see those games played in the French, because in this way one can start to acquire a taste. What are the usual maneuvers? What are the tactics or the avoided tactics? As we can see from this book, the annotations are really good, because it's nearly annotated move by move, so it's really great in my opinion, okay? Okay, e5, c5, a3, and here there is a diagram. The more common continuation at this point is bishop takes a c3, okay? But Botvinnik didn't play that, he played bishop a5. Again, some of these lines are just a question of taste, that they went in fashion or out of fashion if one of the champions lost a game, okay? So it's nothing new about it, but it tells you about it. b4, a pawn sacrifice recommended by Alekhine in his book on the New York 1924 tournament. Soon after, it was tested in a similar position, with the inclusion of the moves knight g3 and f6 in the game Botvinnik-Rogozin, Leningrad 1926. So Here we discover that Botvinnik had a history of playing this opening, and he already played some moves relative to some improvements made by other players, in this case the world champion Alekhine. What is the point here? The point here is that you can really, if you study Botvinnik games, you can see the evolution of the French, for example, the French defense, okay? And here it says, Alekhine consider only the reply c takes b4, after which white obtains strong pressure by knight b5, b takes e3, c3, etc. This idea I also managed to test out in a game against Pavlov versus Pianov. Okay, so clearly Botvinnik was well prepared, and now we go back to the position from the book. So we are returning back to that position. White played b4, a pawn sacrifice, like we said. C takes d4, knight b5. In the ninth game of the match, Smyslov played the stronger 7 queen g4. So imagine we are just at move 7 and they are playing some novelty, something that wasn't played before or wasn't much known, because in the time obviously they didn't have computers, the games were not continuously published right away. Sometimes a magazine would take a month to take out a game, so for a month something was totally unknown, okay? So it seems that ninth game concluded in Smyslov's favor, okay? And of course here Botvinnik also tells us in which other games some moves have been played, like this knight b5, okay? So there is a game Makogonov-Aramovich in 1949, so 6 years before that move was played. Given that around this time Smyslov occasionally worked with Makogonov, such shared tastes were only to be expected. So imagine how the preparation by Botvinnik also went to know which one of the trainers Smyslov had, and probably check his games and what he generally played, right? It should be added that the variation with 7 knight b5 as opposed to 7 queen g4 leads to quieter play. So this is quiet and this is very violent, okay? And now black continues with bishop c7. White doesn't care to retake immediately and support the central pawn with f4. Obviously you need to develop the pieces in the game, so black continues with knight e7 and white does the same, knight f3. So sometimes you are not in a rush to take because that pawn is dead. And so since it's dead, why would you rush to take it? You take it when you are threatened in some sense, okay? Now black played knight bc6. Here he shows us that Botvinnik knew that in the other game just mentioned, the other player Abramovich played this one, a6, and this was weaker, okay? And he gives a line, which I don't give you, because again, you can, when you buy the book, you will do all this move by yourself, okay? So he played knight bc6, bishop d3, and now bishop b8. You can ask me why bishop b8? Because generally you want to try to keep the bishop pair. They are quite strong. However, this is a bad bishop in the French, because as you can see it doesn't have much space. This was a better bishop, but now it's kind of boxed in, right? So it will be interesting to see how black was able to win from such a position. And here Botvinnik says, of course, this maneuver uses up a lot of time, but the dark square bishop is worth having. So he clearly wants to have it. Why? Because probably he doesn't want to give up the control of this square. Now white continues with knight b takes d4, a6, why a6? Because probably if he played b5 this knight would have some problems. We're going bishop e3, bishop a7 is beautiful. So this a6 wasn't for b5, but it was to give space to this bishop, to put it back into the game. So here we have learned a strategic maneuver. So a6 was played to play this. Beautiful move. Beautiful move. And castle. Notice that sometimes you need to take some time to play the moves. The fact that you have to watch the games, it doesn't mean that you just watch them mechanically, but you try to guess what is the next move. Okay? And here there is a comment by Botvinnik which says, white aims at the exchange of dark square bishops whilst retaining the outpost on d4, and consequently a pleasant endgame. More dangerous for black was c3 instead of castling. Okay? So as to recapture with a pawn in the event of an exchange on d4. Then white would have more chances of attacking on the king side. Smyslov carried out an analogous plan in the fourth game of the match. Now, however, the resulting exchanges allow black to relieve the opponent's pressure and complete his development satisfactorily. Okay, so knight takes d4. This is an important point that you must know. When you are cramped, like black is, the important thing is to exchange the pieces. Because if you exchange the pieces, the cramping kind of disappear. Bishop takes d4, and Botvinnik here says that also this move followed by this was something to keep in consideration. Okay, so for him it was a good move. But white played bishop takes d4, he continued with bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, and now black is able to play queen b6. This is a typical problem once you move this, so you obviously have to move the queen. Sorry, not the queen, the king. Okay? Now, of course, you cannot play queen takes d4 because it's a big blunder. Why is a big blunder? I will not tell you. You need to be more interactive, pause the video and find it out for yourself. Okay? That is, however, a typical tactic that you should know. So, as you can see, also, like I.M. Kislik said, to watch this kind of games, it makes you aware of some tactics that happens in every kind of game, and so you start to build your mental library of tactics. So bishop d7. Now black can take that. It's not a problem anymore after this move. So obviously black can play, and which means that white needed to defend this in some ways. Okay. Another thing, however, if black would have played this, could you play this? Obviously this is not in the book. I think you need to find out the answer for yourself. Okay, bishop d7, c3, rook c8. Obviously, if you have an open file, you try to occupy it with the rook. Queen e1 and h6. With this last move, white prevented his opponent from castling. On 18 castle, which was this, there could follow queen h4, knight g6, bishop takes g6, f takes g6, rook f3, with a dangerous initiative. Now castling is again possible, but since white is ready for it and prepared to begin active operations on the king side, black for the time being refrains from castling. So, as you can see, instead of castling, he played h6, okay, and this would allow the castling. But, as you can see, Botvinnik tell you also one thing: if your king is safe in the center, it's better to wait castling, because you decide if there is something more interesting to do, right? So again, this is a top level game. There was a reason why he was keeping his king in the center. e4. White dreams of being able to pressurize his opponent on the queen side by means of e4, e5, but he overestimates his chances. It should be noted that after 19 rook c1, a5, followed by rook c8, a8, black retains counterplay. The weakness created by the advance b2, b4 begins to have its say. So sometimes you also need to be able to visualize this kind of lines, okay? You don't need to move the pieces, you need to work out on your visualization. So after e4, which is a typical move, there is a typical counter move that you learn. And again, as you can see, it's very good to be able to watch this game, right? e5, this is the move that you generally play when someone tries to advance like that. The only reply which white had expected, of course. Knight b3. It was on this move that white had placed his hopes, when he began the maneuver with a3, a4. After a takes b4, c takes b4, he would have a clear advantage on the queen side. However, Smyslov had overlooked his opponent's cunning retort. Okay, so what is his opponent's cunning retort? Here in the book there is a diagram, which means you pause and you start to think. Notice that the diagrams are all from white side, I see, so in this case it's not useful for us. But I generally love to be able to follow the book only just watching the diagrams, okay? Black played queen c7, the turning point of the game, since now black takes over the initiative. Since the continuation, knight takes a5, b6, knight b3, a queen takes c3, is far from favorable to white, he is forced to put the knight on c5, where it is badly placed. Okay, so knight c5 and bishop c6. As you can see, this bishop now is starting to get a little more freedom. And maybe it's interesting, yeah. Obviously, here is said that if you castle, white takes, queen takes, and b takes a5, and so black needs to find a way to recover that pawn, okay? But it's possible, okay? It's possible. So we said bishop c6, queen f2. There is no danger for black in the line with f5, and here it gives a line, okay? Castle, knight b3, bishop d7, and queen c5. Smyslov almost always tries to exchange queens. If it does not worsen his position, here too he chooses this strategy, hoping to hold the ending. It must be admitted that this was the right decision. And he gives another line instead with rook fc1. fc1. But this is interesting, because you see, from this note, we understand that Botvinnik not only studied the games of Smyslov for his openings, he studied the games of Smyslov to see what he generally likes to do, and he discovered that he tries always to exchange the queens. Why? Because he wants to go into an endgame, because he feels himself extremely confident that he will win the endgame. This is honestly similar to today's Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen likes to go into the endgame because he is able to grind every kind of player in the endgame and kill them there. So that's very interesting, something that we have learned, right? Okay, so what did Black play? Black did give Smyslov his queen exchange. The exchange of queens was forced, since after queen d8 would have followed queen e3, and white wins an important tempo, since his bishop is now defended. He says that the line with b takes a5 wasn't so good, okay? Sorry, the line here, where is this, the queen? We have lost the queen. Where did he go? We lost the queen. God save the queen. Here we go. Okay, so instead of this, he said, if you play this, white could play this, right? But this is not good for white, and he gives a line about it, okay? So this was the best move for Botvinnik that Black could play. Knight takes c5, rook c7, and knight takes d7. This is also logical. The knight cannot maintain the c5 square anyway. Rook takes d7, b takes a5. Now it seems that this is an advantage, but I don't think so, because watch the white pawns. The white pawns are doubled and isolated. This is isolated. I don't know, this pawn structure, in my opinion, favors white, black, because black will start to attack all these isolated pawns and probably gain an advantage out of it, right? In fact, after b takes a5, next move is rook a8. Honestly, I'm happy of commenting this game, because one, it's a logical game. Botvinnik explains the things very well. It's clearly a beautiful game, beautiful book, beautiful everything, so we can really grow up as a chess player. a6. But this is a stereotype decision. White tries to close the A file, but the pawn on b7 was an object of attack. Once it is transferred to a6, it restricts the activity of the white's bishop by controlling the square b5, whilst the white pawn on a4 can prove vulnerable. He should have played the immediate c4, or, as suggested by Haberbach, bishop b5. So instead of a5, a6, he should have played this or this. So a6, bishop takes, not the bishop, pawn takes a6. As we can see, this limits that bishop, so it's a good move. c4. White eliminates his weak c-pawn, but in the process open the lines for the rooks, black rooks. Maybe, therefore, he should have preferred Romanovsky's recommendation, which was rook a b1. Okay, Romanovsky was a very famous chess player of the 1940s that wrote a very interesting middle game book. So of course it was from the time, probably today is not relevant anymore, but if someone get it, they can have an idea, okay? So it's not a bad thing to have. After c4, d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and black plays rook d4, which is a good move. Now it becomes obvious that the position of a pawn on a6 is very useful to black. Bishop e2, knight d5, g3, knight c3, bishop f3, obviously it's attacking, rook b8, rook a3. If white had allowed the move rook b3, he would have been in a very difficult position, since the knight on c3 would have been invulnerable. White meets this threat in the only possible way. Knight b1, and this is possibly black's fourth real error in the whole game. He should have quietly taken the pawn with knight takes a4. And here he gives a line in which he explains why, okay? So, rook b1, not so good, not a good move. Rook a2, knight d2, rook f2, knight c4, and h4. Anticipating the move g7, g5. So this is called prophylaxis. So again, imagine how much we are learning from just watching one game. However, as I said before, I think one should first watch all the French defense games played in the match to have an idea of how the match evolved and what Smyslov did to obviously counter attack or counter defend or neutralize black's idea, okay? Okay, so after that move, h4, g5, this is the thing, anticipating the move g5, white tries to exchange as many pawns as possible. But what does the black play? g5. H takes g5, h takes g5, f takes g5. Again, once more, you can see that now they are all weak. They are all weak. This is isolated attack, this is isolated, this is isolated, and so they are not so good, right? In fact, black takes immediately. Knight takes e5, bishop e2, rook b1. Okay, so in this position he played rook b1, and it's not a good move. It says a second mistake, and as often happens, it comes on the last move of a time control. What does it mean, this thing? That after the time control they had the possibility to adjourn in the time, which means they would put a move in an envelope and then go to rest. Obviously they were not resting, they would analyze the position because they are grandmaster of top level, so they remember perfectly well this position, and then they try to find for the day after a way to win. It seems that now if you pause the thing, instead of rook b1 he should have played a5, and here he gives a line, okay? A good line to explain why that move is good. So, rook b1, king g2, the seal move, sealed, okay? So this is put in an envelope. So they, after rook b1, white didn't play immediately. He asked the arbiter to take an envelope, he wrote his move, and that would have been played the day after, probably in the morning. and this is the move that he played. Now what happens is that Botvinnik during the night had to analyze this, and also this, okay? So obviously, or also this. He had to analyze all these moves and prepare for the day after. The day after, when they opened the envelope, this was the move played, and so he immediately probably played A5 because he studied about all night long. Now they say that today in our modern time we cannot have adjournment because nobody would play blah 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 blah, but I think that would teach us a lot. The other problem is that today we would use a computer to find the best move, so probably it wouldn't help us a lot in improvement. Why? Because we would let the computer do the job instead of doing it ourselves. So A5, Rook C2, this was one of the strongest continuation studied by Botvinnik. The other was Bishop H5, okay, so it gives also those lines, and then there is Rook B3. And here there is a very long note, a curious episode. When I began analyzing the adjourned position, I immediately found the best plane in the diagram position, so in this position. Although possibly it's still not enough to win. Okay, and here there is a big analysis, okay? And then it says, during the adjournment session itself, I had the feeling that I was not playing in the best way, but I could not restrain myself from following the prepared path. Okay. Rook F4, and this is the decisive mistake played by White. Clearly, during this adjournment analysis, Smyslov had failed to spot the maneuver pointed out in the note to White's 42nd move, and as a result, either missed or underestimated Black's reply to the text. So, what do you think Black is going to play here? Try to pause the video and find out. He played Rook D5, exclamation point. Now this maneuver is even stronger than in the variation with Bishop H5. So, okay, this was a variation given before but I didn't show, okay? But here there is an analysis so you can follow it. Rook E4, King G7, Bishop H5, and Knight G6. Sooner or later, White will have to go into a bad rook ending. Rook G4, Rook E3. The threats are Knight E5, followed by Rook D5, D3, and also, or a possible Rook E5, so this would go down, okay? So clearly an interesting move that he calculated well. Okay, so how did White continue? Bishop take G6, King take G6, Rook F2, and Rook F5. The simplest, although possibly, was Rook takes G5, okay? Rook takes G5, King takes G5, Rook takes F7, and Rook E4, which leads to victory, okay? So this was the simplest move, but he didn't play it. He played Rook F5. Rook takes F5, and now how would you take? Would you take with the king or would you take with the pawn? Try to discover it, because he didn't put a diagram, but he wrote an exclamation point after he takes F5, which means this is very good. Rook C4, Rook E4, Rook C7, Rook takes A4, and well, now I think the game is won for White, for Black. Rook A7, Rook F3, right? Yeah, generally rook f3 would be the right one. And king h3. Ingenious but insufficient. However, it seems that also after king h2, white would lose, okay? So king h3, f4, king h4, f takes g3, and rook a6. King f5, the only way, if king g7, there was rook h3, king h3, and we reach an endgame which was already assessed as drawn in the notes to white for 44th move. The extra pawn on g3 makes no difference. So this is kind of interesting, right? So let's see. He played king f5. Where is the other rook? Give me the other rook. Okay, in there. Yes. King f5. So instead, rook a6, king f5. Rook f6, king e4, king h3, rook f3, rook a6, rook f5, and here white resigned. So imagine how beautiful it was, the fact that they also knew the endgame already so well. Okay, Botvinnik didn't play many tournaments during the year, but it seems he was always well prepared. And this concludes, for the moment, the game part of this book. I eventually will put up more games from this book, because as you can see, we have learned a lot just watching this simple game. Good luck in your chess improvement.